Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. From the Marvel Cinematic Universe comes a film about one of the most iconic comic book characters of all time, an ordinary man seeking to become a soldier and fight for his country, who takes an experimental serum that grants him superhuman abilities, transforming him into the nation's greatest hero. We're talking about Captain America, the First Avenger. The First Avenger was directed by Joe Johnston from a script by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely. It was released in the United States on July 22, 2011, and was distributed by Paramount Pictures. The First Avenger features characters appearing in Marvel Comics, including Captain America, who was created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. Cap debuted in Captain America Comics #1 in March of 1941. The film takes place in 1942 during World War II and focuses on Steve Rogers, a scrawny kid from Brooklyn. Steve's best friend, James Bucky Barnes, is enlisted in the military and gets his orders to ship overseas. Rogers, plagued by a litany of physical issues that prevent him from joining the war effort, is approached by Dr. Abraham Erskine, who recruits him into the Strategic Scientific Reserve and uses him as a candidate for the super soldier experiment. During his physical testing, Rogers falls in love with Peggy Carter, a British MI6 agent who's attached to the SSR. After a series of rigorous tests, Erskine chooses Rogers to be the man that receives the super soldier serum, which grants him superhuman strength and speed, transforming him into Captain America. Meanwhile, in Germany, Johann Schmidt, a key figure in Hitler's regime who has also benefited from the serum, is building an army called Hydra. Schmidt ultimately becomes the Red Skull, and after obtaining a powerful energy source known as the Tesseract, plans to lead Hydra in an effort to not only win the war, but also destroy anyone who stands in his way. It's up to Captain America and his band of soldiers to stop him. The First Avenger was a box office smash upon its release, earning nearly $371 million on a budget of $140 to $216 million. It was also a hit with critics, many of whom praised it for its retro style and hard-hitting action. The film spawned two sequels, The Winter Soldier in 2014 and Civil War in 2016. It was also a building block for the Avengers franchise, which featured Captain America as well as other characters who also appeared in films leading up to the first Avengers movie. Thanks to the performances, the story, and the action, The First Avenger remains a favorite of fans all over the world and one of the most important MCU films ever made. And that's the lowdown on The First Avenger. If you're going to build a comic book universe, depending on what publisher you're talking about, you got to be sure that you nail the big heroes first. It seems to be the way the big two have done it. It seems to be the way that other universes or other publishers who are starting to dip their toes into the cinematic world for their heroes are attempting to do it. By the big two, of course, we mean Marvel and DC. Yeah, you start with your big ones. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Iron Man, who was never considered to be a big one. He is now, the world over, Iron Man's considered to be a heavy hitter for Marvel. Don't know if it was always considered that way in the books. I'm not going to say he was a second-tier hero. He was an Avenger. He was a big deal. Does have a rich history, that character. Was he considered top tier? Maybe not. But again, because of the MCU, now he is. But again, like we said, you have to nail the big ones. So they nailed Thor. They nailed the Hulk. Took a couple tries, but they got there. They finally nailed it. They also nailed Captain America, which to this day, to be able to say that they nailed Captain America, and not only have they nailed it, they did justice to the character, they did justice to the creators, they did justice to the readers who have read and loved this character and adored him for years upon years upon years. Long time, this guy. It's no small task. Why is that? Well, it's pretty simple, kids, because if you go too hard one way, then it's, you got Zack Snyder's Superman, who's just a little bit too self-righteous at times for my liking. So it's too hard. If you go too soft, it's John Cena. No disrespect to John Cena or Henry Cavill. Okay, just saying that's a fine line you walk with a guy like this. Anytime you talk about a patriotic gimmick, again, fine line you have to walk. You don't want to go too hard in either direction. But for the First Avenger, I'm telling you, they nailed it. the moment I saw this movie, every beat of this film feels to me like they absolutely nailed it. It's easy to say this now because of we see where he's come, how far he's come. We know what happened to Steve in the MCU, and he has a happy ending, which is great. Uh, but yeah, looking back on it, 2011, this movie comes out. Iron Man was 2008, kicks off the MCU with a bang. Phil, I'll ask you right out the gate. Were you fairly confident they were going to nail this movie? Did you have any doubt going in that they were going to be able to get this character right and not make it either too dramatic or too hokey one way or the other?
I don't know if I would say I was confident, but I did like the names that they had attached to it. I mean we've talked about Rocketeer and just having a guy like Joe Johnston attached to it, and then having a good cast, whether it be with Tommy Lee Jones and still the unknown of how well Chris Evans was going to do in a role, but just knowing his resume and just having a bunch of other people attached to it, I was like, this could be good, and I feel like it actually overachieved.
Oh, it so does. It feels like a period piece in so many instances. It does feel like a product of its time. I mean, from the costuming to the language the characters use to the way they interact with each other, to the cars, to the weapons, the scenery. And yes, kids, we know it's the MCU. A lot of this stuff is green screen, obviously. But at the end of the day, when it's so well done, it doesn't matter. What matters is they've got the tone and the vibe is right. But man, so many things click together for this movie to make it such a hit. Um, I love that this movie is unlike anything they had done to that point. And honestly, I'm trying to think of what else looks like this besides the Agent Carter series. I can't think of a thing. I mean, I say this movie still sort of stands out on its own, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. I think that it's unique. Even other movies that are kind of prequels, like Captain Marvel, for example. Captain Marvel is kind of a different take on a period piece, but it's not what First Avengers is. It still doesn't look like this movie. This movie definitely has its own feel. It has its own tone that we don't see in any of the other stuff, like you said, other than the Agent Carter show.
Yeah, and that'll be another topic for another time. But man, I'm still upset that that show didn't make it. But yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, man, this film is our real sincere heavy introduction to the MCU of Chris Evans as the first Avenger. I mean, this movie is appropriately titled. I mean, he is man. I can't wait to gush over this film. I just love this movie so much. We did the Avengers episode, and I remember you saying during that episode that you felt like it could very well be considered this generation Star Wars in terms of, its impact, what it means, how well the story is, or how well it was done, the acting in it, the action, everything just has that larger than life feel. Do you feel that Captain America: The First Avenger has that iconic status as well?
I definitely feel like the Captain America trilogy, outside of the Avengers franchise, of course, is probably one of the crowning achievements of the Marvel Studio run.
Mm.
I feel like in a lot of ways, it's for my money, it's one of the best superhero trilogies ever. I would put it right up there with the Dark Knight trilogy, and I actually think that it's better than the Dark Knight trilogy. Might be a hot take there, um, but I do think that it's one of the best. I feel like in terms of what all three movies represent, all three movies are very different. Like this movie has its own tone. It's kind of a period piece. The second movie has a like espionage feel, and it's a lot darker. And then the third movie is like a big crossover movie. Like it's the closest to being like an Avengers movie without being an Avengers movie.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, well put. I mean, it's a fantastic trilogy. I mean, next to the Avengers three films, maybe the best trilogy that Marvel did. You think?
I would definitely say so. I think that out of all the solo movies, for sure, it's the best trilogy.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, there's so much to get into here. We've got to start with the cast. We got to zip through this list. We've already spoke about Chris Evans a bit. Um, what does he bring to this? that maybe no other actor could have brought to this? What is it that's so special about Chris Evans that he makes you believe that Steve Rogers is not only a real person, but that he really is humble? He's a good person with a good soul and a kind man. What is it about Chris Evans that really puts that over for you?
I feel like, even though I said earlier, that he brings like a resume because he's been a working actor for so long. But I feel like he brings he brings kind of that same undertone of being an underdog to it. Like because I feel like a lot of people, kind of typecast him as maybe a comedy guy or, you know, not a not a leading man. Like he might have been typecast as kind of a character guy. And I feel like coming into this role, he kind of had a lot to prove. And then on top of that, I feel like everything he's done outside the movie as just a regular person, whether it be online or in some of the things that he stood up for, I just feel like he's been perfect. I feel like he's been perfect in the role. He's been a perfect ambassador for the films. He's just been perfect.
Yeah, he's and I made the comment about Cena earlier because it's nothing to do with him as a guy, but the personality that he's put over for years in WWE is, you could jokingly call him the big boy scout or Captain America. And if you say Captain America with the name John Cena next to it to a wrestling fan, he knows exactly what you mean. It's not that you're ripping on the guy, but he kind of gets it. He's like, I get it. He's over the top. He's a little too patriotic and not in a bad way, but it's almost impossible to believe that anybody's this good. It's possible to believe that anybody is this kind and this honest and this upright. But man, Evans, if Evans is really like a closet douchebag, we'll never know, hopefully, because man, he's so good at this. I just can't. I'm going to attempt to put it into words, but I'm sure it won't be easy all the way through. Um, Peggy Carter, Hayley Atwell. I've gushed over Hayley Atwell here on the show before. I make no apologies. She's fantastic. I love her so much. I just there again, go back and fantasy book and fantasy recast all you want, whatever you want. She is Peggy Carter. She's strong. She's sassy when she needs to be. Dude, she holds her own in this movie with any man she's on screen with. And that seems like a silly comment because she's an actor like they are. Of course, she's cut out for this. But in the world of a female, where it's unfortunately they're still being tested against their male counterparts. Uh, from my world to her, it's a compliment. She more than holds her own against anybody in this movie, I believe. What do you think about Hayley Atwell as Agent Carter?
I think that she is, in a lot of ways, the breakout star of this movie.
Mm.
I think that she more than held her own. I feel like it's not even just that she's so great in the role. I feel like Peggy is just such a great character. And when they first announced that she was getting a spinoff, I was super excited because she was one of my favorite parts of the movie. Um, and I'm with you. I thought that her show should have gone on longer. I hated that they haven't tried to revive it for Disney Plus yet. Um, I feel like she should get something, even if it's just like a last movie or something that's a Disney Plus exclusive. I feel like I would like to see another send off for her. Like even if we go into the what if stuff and they do like a spinoff that's like the Captain Bridges stuff, I'll take it any way to get
Oh,
more Peggy Carter.
I'm so with you. I would love to see that happen. And she seems to be down for this stuff. She came back and did the last Avengers film in the flashback, and she looked freaking great and did the what if stuff. I think she's down for whatever. And honestly, I believe they probably think a lot of her. And dude, I'd be shocked to find out that they're done with this character. I just don't see it. I think that she'll be back for something. So that would be cool. Um, one guy who's probably done with the MCU, unfortunately, Hugo Weaving as Johann Schmidt. You may know him um, as the agent. So yeah, we're talking about the Matrix. Done that episode. Look it up, kids. It's fun. Yeah, Hugo Weaving, and I'm such a nerd when it comes to this stuff. I just want all the toys to get along. You know what I mean? So when I find out one of the toys doesn't want to play with the other toys, it upsets me. But supposedly he didn't want anything to do with this after the fact. He hated the makeup. he didn't speak ill of anyone in the cast that I know of, or the director or anything like that. But I don't know. I don't think he enjoyed the experience. But dude, he is great in this movie, man.
He is great, and I mean, when I talked about earlier how they put together a great cast, man, um, you can say that Chris had a lot to do to prove himself in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, Hugo didn't have anything to prove coming into this movie. We already knew what he did as the agent. We already knew what he did in movies like Lord of the Rings. He had the resume.
Yeah.
So I was the most excited to see what he would do with Red Skull, and I thought he did a fantastic job.
So good. He's the right amount of pompous. And dude, his delivery is so off-putting because there's at no time where I feel like that he doesn't believe what he's saying. And there's moments when he delivers things so straight face, I'm like, wow, that felt real. Like he never, dude, there's a time for the mustache twirling villain, and it can be fun in small doses. But when it's too much, I can't do it. Like, oh, it's too much. He
Yeah,
never feels too over the top to me.
this guy was born to play over the top villains, man. Like
Yeah,
he just has the look. He just has it. Like he
he
has
does.
the look. He has the appearance without saying a lot that you can just look at this guy and he looks menacing.
Oh, he's so good. He's so good. I mean, we're nailing it with these characters so far. Sebastian Stan in a role that he is still portraying to this day, and it's been 10 years, dude. It has been 10 years since this film. Can you wrap your head around that?
That is crazy. That's really crazy.
A
Um,
decade.
yeah, I mean, I don't think the Sebastian Stan did a lot in this movie. I mean, he had moments of greatness, but of course he would go on to do better things with the role. Um, and I think that he's proven himself to be a great actor in this franchise. I mean, there's so many things that he's done, and I'm just sitting thinking 10 years, like man, when I think about how good he is in Winter Soldier, how great he is in Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Um, I tell people all the time he got me. The scene where Sebastian Stan got me is when uh, uh, Sam has given away the shield, right? And
Yeah.
they're talking in the jail, and they're having that kind of interrogation in that room before the woman comes in and talks to him. And he tells them, "You threw away the shield. How can you do that? You got to tell me, what does that mean?" And he was like, "Doesn't mean anything." He was like, he was right about you. You have to tell me he was right about you, because if he wasn't right about you, what does that mean about me? And I immediately was like, "Oh no!" Like he got me. It was like that line just killed me.
Yeah, because you don't really know why he's still busting his balls as much as he is. You really don't know. It's like, man, does he really not like Sam at all? And then you get it. You get the punchline. It was so good. But the groundwork for that character is laid in this film for sure, and we get to see the friendship between him and Steve, and we'll get there. It's just freaking great. Um, I've always been a Tommy Lee Jones fan, but this is going to sound crazy biased. I think this is one of his better performances, and he's not even in a lot of this movie, like a lot of it. But man, he is so. And this is meant as a compliment. It kind of feels like he just showed up, read the script, and 10 minutes later they put him in the film because he never feels like he's grandstanding. He doesn't feel too rehearsed. He
Yeah,
just he honest to God feels like an old hardcore military guy who's there to do a job. It's awesome.
I mean, this is a vet.
Yes.
He's brought in to be a veteran um, on this cast, and he's brought in to be like a veteran in terms of like what is his rank and everything, and you just get a feel of it. He comes in, he brings the right amount of uh, seriousness to the role. I think his humor is fantastic in the movie. Um, like I just think like his best line in the entire movie is when Steve jumps off the Jeep and he goes, "What are you looking at? I'm not gonna kiss you."
Yeah. He's got maybe the best one-liners in this movie.
Yeah, he's great. He's great throughout this movie.
Yeah, he's so good. I love him. Uh, let's see. Dominic Cooper as Howard Stark. So let me ask you, Phil, where are you on the two Howard Starks? Yeah, you're too young to maybe know this comparison, but the two Darrens on Bewitched has vexed people. It's vexed people for years. John Slattery and Dominic Cooper. Which one is your Howard Stark?
I'm gonna go with Dominic. I just because we got more of him here and
Yeah.
in the Agent Carter TV show, and I enjoy him in both.
Hmm.
Um, I do like the other one we got as like the older, kind of closer to Walt Disney version that they were trying to do
Yeah, good call.
in Iron Man 2. But this one, um, man, it's so interesting because when I was watching this after having watched Rocketeer last week, I feel like in a lot of ways Captain America is a more polished and mature version of what Joe tried to do with Rocketeer. And if
Yeah.
you look at it this way, like you can see like how Dominic in this is kind of like more of a fully formed version of Howard Hughes they was trying to do in that movie. It
Good
didn't look
call.
as much like a character. It was like he was like an actual character in this movie.
Yeah, and he's younger, he's cockier, he's more full, he's more of a ladies' man, he's more full of himself, he's not tied down, he's not married yet. He seems a lot like Tony in this movie to me.
I feel like he hit all of the right notes where you can see Tony in him, and you can see like the Howard Hughes stuff in there and what he, who he grows up to be. I think Dominic nails like the all the duality of the character.
Yeah, no kidding. Um, yeah, he's good. I do appreciate Slattery's work, I do, but I had to say I'm partial to Cooper, and plus Cooper was in the Agent Carter series as well.
Yeah, he was in both, and he showed up again in the What If episode.
Yep, he's great. Stanley Tucci as Abraham Erskine is I, he is as flawless as Tommy Lee Jones. He is as sincere, and he's so good that when he gets shot, I'm just and Steve gets that look on his face like I gotta catch this guy. I'm like, God, kill him, just freaking kill him. Like I didn't want to see Erskine get killed, but man, Stanley Tucci in this movie is great as Dr. Erskine.
Yeah, I think he does. I mean, like it's tough to have a role like this to be like the Uncle Ben character that has to get you to care about them very fast, and then like their fate is going to be what their fate is going to be like within the first half hour or so of the movie. And
Mhm.
I thought he did a great job, and that might be you know, some credit to the writing on it as well. But I thought he did a good job with the material he was given.
Oh yeah, for sure. To round out the cast here, kids, we got Neil McDonough as Timothy Dum Dum Dugan. Freaking fantastic. A lot of makeup here. This guy, I think he's got some body padding going on too. But man, he's good. He has been a part of the DC's universe, the Berlanti verse on TV. So he's familiar with the comic book genre for sure. And I appreciated his work here. I thought it was very good. Derek Luke is Gabe Jones, and we're talking about the Howling Commandos here, kids, which I thought he did a great job. I love that they included them. Kenneth Choi as Jim Morita, also a member, and don't think they ever call them the Howling Commandos in the movie, do they?
I don't think they do, but I mean, I think like if you're a comic book fan and you know what they're referencing, like it's pretty clear that he's dumb dumb and like they're I mean, if you read Captain America comics, you know who they are.
Yeah. Bruno Ricci as Jacques Dernay. Hopefully, I pronounced that right. Also a member of the team. So yeah. Let's see. J.J. Field as James Montgomery Fallsworth. Also a member of the team. All these guys were basically set dressing, for lack of a better term, but they were so good that it just felt real, and they didn't. Nothing really stood out to me like it didn't fit.
They look the part, and I
Yeah.
think it's kind of the same. Again, I to go back to Rocketeer, and you think about when Cliff has like all of those people he hangs out with at that diner, and they don't say a lot, but they feel like a part of that world. Like it's just a part of world building in that time for Captain America. In the same way here, And man, they do such a good job with it that I found myself after the montages and stuff of this movie wishing we got more of it, wishing like maybe we got like a mini
Yeah.
series with like Cap and the Howling Commandos.
Didn't they play a part in the Agent Carter series though also?
Uh,
I want to say they did, but I could be wrong.
I don't remember the Howling Commandos showing up that much.
Hmm. We also, before we get started here, we got to mention Toby Jones as Dr. Zola. He is, I just, man, we've gushed so much. I have for sure over this cast. He is as neurotic and as evil scientist and as creepy, something out of a 1950s black and white horror movie as you can possibly be. I can just imagine him saying, "It's alive." I mean, dude, he is so perfectly cast as Dr. Zola. He feels like the real deal, plucked out of a history book. He just looks like he's an evil scientist up to no good.
I definitely agree. I feel like he's another one where we get just bits and pieces of him here, and we get more of him in Winter Soldier, and he's great in
Yeah.
that. We get more of him in the What If, and he's just so good. I don't know if that's him actually. I don't know if he does the voice for Zola in the What If episode, but whatever. He sets the foundation for Zola and MCU, so
Oh yeah,
we'll
for
credit
sure.
for him. We'll credit him
And
for him.
I think the MCU version is more entertaining than the comic book version, to be honest. So yeah, good stuff. There is there's a funny little tidbit in here. We'll get to the Stanley cameo in a bit, but yeah, um, it's interesting how the cast came together and how they all worked with each other. And man, it just feels like the real deal. Again, none of this feels like it's bogus or it's just we have to make this look like 1942. I mean, it just doesn't. I can't speak for everyone that saw it, but it just doesn't feel that way to me. It just feels like the real deal, like a time capsule, perhaps. Um, so, kids, basically, this movie kicks off the MCU, at least in timeline's sake, not in order of release. Obviously, the first one was Iron Man in '08. This came 3 years later. Without Cap, I think it's safe to say there are no Avengers and no MCU. And yes, Chris Evans, if you didn't know, gives an iconic performance. Dude, tell me how freaking epic this soundtrack is. When you hear that refrain, that music, da 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 da, and you just know that it's Cap's music. Dude, it's so great. I don't know if I would say it's as iconic as Superman is for Superman, but for Cap, when I hear that music, I know it's Captain America.
I agree. I feel like the soundtrack for this is really good, and I actually have to give it credit for the posters for this thing are
Mm,
fantastic. Like the original posters for this movie are they look great.
yeah.
Um, man, I keep jumping back and forth between the other movies, but I don't know if you remember. There's a poster for Civil War with Cap looking out of a helicarrier, and it just shows his back with the shield on his back. Love that poster. It's one of my favorite
Yes.
MCU posters.
Yeah, it's great. They've got some smart guys over there, man. They know what they're doing. Like oh, I mean, you have to have your stuff together in this day and age. I mean, anybody that knows how to use Photoshop can make anything these days. So if they're going to deliver something to you like comic book movies, it has to look good. They know what they're doing, man.
Yeah, but the main poster we get for this movie with Chris Evans like front and center with the shield, and he has his helmet off, and then you have all the other cast behind him, and he has like the you have Red Skull in the background with just the skull, and then the American flag behind it all. It looks so cool. It's such a great poster.
It really is. And of course, back in the day, before you had the internet to screw everything up for you, the only way you knew a movie was coming to the theater was by the posters. Like, you walk out of the movie or you're walking into the theater, you see all these posters up, and it's exciting. You're like, "Ooh, what's this?" Now you just Google it on your way into the theater to watch your film, and you find out everything about it. So
Yeah, I really love the promotional material for this movie.
yeah, like I said, man, they're on their game. They know what they're doing for sure. They've got it figured out. Um, so the film, of course, kicks off with its present day, at least in terms of 2020 or 2011, excuse me. We just assume these are Shield agents that show up. So yeah, they find Cap. He's frozen in ice. It's been for about 69 years when they find him. And whoever the agent is that sees him says, "Give me he's on his phone. He says, "Give me a direct line to the colonel." He's told it's 3 a.m. He says, "I don't care what time it is. This one's waited long enough." And that's when the camera closes up on the ice and you see the shield. And we go back to Tønsberg, Norway in March of 1942. This is where, Phil, we get to see Hydra very, very early on. It's the first big thing that happens. They've come for the Tesseract. They come to this small village. The Tesseract at the time, Phil, we don't know, is actually the Soul Stone that will later be used by Thanos in the Infinity Gauntlet. We don't know any of this at the time. Johann Schmidt, who will become the Red Skull, is there. He's got a nice ride that is only referred to as the Schmidt Hydra Coupe. But man, this is a bad freaking car, dude. So
Yeah, I mean, when I first, I mean, like you can't do anything with Red Skull at that time period and not talk about a cosmic cube. So when I first saw it,
yeah,
like I thought Tesseract was like a fancy word of saying because they didn't want to just say cosmic cube. But when you see it, that's absolutely what it is from the comics, cosmic cube.
oh yeah, for sure. And we're so ignorant on this stuff at the time. I don't even was there even a rumor that they were going to do the Infinity War at some point, or I mean, when did that start taking shape?
No, because remember we don't see Thanos until the end of Avengers,
Very
and
true.
Captain America comes out right before Avengers because the end credit scene for Captain America is for Avengers, isn't it?
Yep, yep. Because Fury tells him he's gonna. Uh, he said, "You got a mission for me. Get me back out in the world." He said, "No, trying to save it." So yeah.
Yeah, that's when it shows him punching the punching bag. That's the end credit scene, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, we get to see the ride. It's a sweet ride. He's talking to the old man who Phil apparently has been the guardian of this thing for I don't know how many years. And he knows it's there. He already knows. He said, "What others sees as superstition, you and I know to be science." And the old man says, "What you seek is just a legend." And Johann hits him with something good. Then why make such an effort to conceal it? Which is awesome. The Tesseract was the crown jewel of Odin's treasure room. He opens a sarcophagus and he pulls it out, but he drops it immediately and it just breaks. And he said, "It's not something one buries, but I do think it's close." And this is one of those moments where he flat out says something straight face that makes me believe that he believes it. He just threatens to destroy the village if the old man doesn't cooperate. And he's like, you have family, you have grandchildren. I have no need to kill them. I have no need to do this. And I'm like, holy God. He's basically saying, I'll burn this place to the ground, but I don't have to. Just tell me where it's at.
Yeah,
Frightening.
terrifying. Yeah,
Yeah.
this I feel like this hits all the right notes. Like I love all of the scenery for this thing. Like the little compartment that he turns that thing around and pulls it out and the cube's in there. I think that's cool. All of the stuff, like the set design for this is great.
Yeah. It's awesome. It just feels real. Again, it just like was the set built for that scene or was it already there? And when it feels to me like it's already there, they've done a good job. It just feels like this is a real place. So that's cool. Um, what's cool is when he finds it and he opens the box. Well, before this happens, he says, "And the Fuhrer digs for trinkets in the desert." And I'm like, oh, he's already throwing shade at Hitler here, and I bet old Adolf doesn't know he's doing it. Um, we already see a power play maybe beginning to develop. He asks the old man if he's ever seen it. The old man says it's not for the eyes of ordinary men. Schmidt says, exactly, of course. And then he gives the order to open fire. The old man warns him he cannot control the power he holds. He will burn. Schmidt says, I already have. And they just basically torch the whole village. They kill the old man. They torch the village. Um, what an opening. Sets the tone, like you said. It hits all the right beats. This guy is going to be a force to be reckoned with. He's a fitting villain because we hate him already. And anytime you're killing innocent men, women, and children, that pretty much tells the rest of the audience, the rest of the film, who they're in for. So yeah, we're seeing the Red Skull before he even becomes the Red Skull. Um,
Yeah, I know some people that complained when the movie first came out that they didn't make it clear that Red Skull was a Nazi. Um, I mean, it's pretty clear that he's a Nazi. Pretty clear that
I
everything
think
around
so.
it is, the same trappings, the way he dresses, the car, all of it. Like you can clearly see the Nazi iconography. Um,
Oh yeah.
but I think they also had to make a pretty hard choice of leaning into, are they definitively Hydra, or are they Nazis? And I've always read it to be that Hydra was like a subset of the Nazis, but it's hard to really complain about it because I feel like this set the foundation for what the Hydra would essentially turn into for the MCU at large. And like I couldn't imagine like the first few MCU movies without Hydra in it.
And not for nothing. You can reference the Nazi stuff all day, but you can't, even in this day and age, all these years later, even for people like you and I who maybe are not directly connected in any way, blood-wise or whatever, to the Holocaust, but man, Nazis equal Holocaust. So, and if you're going to use that in a story, it is what it is. But if you're telling a comic book story, maybe it's not best to go there. So, Hydra, I think, provides a safe way around that.
I feel like Nazis kind of date the movie in a weird way too. Um, and
Yeah.
man, it's weird to say this, but it's almost it's almost like Nazis are understood to be evil, right? Like anybody with common sense and knows anything about
Yeah.
history knows like Nazis are evil, and it's almost like you don't have to give any more motivation other than they're Nazis after you establish that they're Nazis, right? It's the same way when we talked about Rocketeer, where once you find out that the villains behind everything were the Nazis, it's like, okay, well, you don't have to give any more explanation because Nazis are evil. Like, that's it. Um, so I almost feel like going on to make Schmidt's plan that he's not just a Nazi. He's not just going and trying to um, follow out Hitler's plan. It gives him an unclear motivation, and it gives you a chance to, develop him more as a character.
Yeah, for sure. And it's uh I just again I just think this gives us a whole other set of villains to hate. And it does a like you said, you put it in the modern times. Like we saw some of that in Shang-Chi with the Ten Rings, where it's like, we've always been in the shadows, we've always been there and always been manipulating governments and stuff. And it's kind of like the Batman stuff also, um, where it's like they've existed for centuries. And I like that idea, but like Nazis have to be defeated, right? I mean, they have to be has to be over because what they stood for was so heinous. I mean, it's yeah. I'm perfectly okay with that. I'm perfectly okay with them using a version of the whole Nazi thing without it directly being them. So I'm perfectly fine with that. Um, we meet Steve Rogers, dude. No matter how many times I see this film, and I've seen it a bunch, the tech behind this de aging and the CG behind it, I forget that's not really Chris Evans, 90 pounds, 5'4" or whatever he is. Like it is, holy God, he looks so good. It is insane for me to even believe that's not an actual Chris Evans walking around, walking, talking. Like it's, man, it's so good. He's short, he's bony, he's trying to join the army. He's been told no a lot. They ask him about his parents. Both of his parents died because of the war. The doc sees this list, this litany of things wrong with this guy. And he's like, well, just give me a chance. He said, you'd be ineligible on your asthma alone. And Steve says, is there anything you can do? He says, I'm doing it, saving your life. And he stamps him 4F. Like, get out of here, kid. I mean, right off the bat, this kid wants to serve his country. I mean, right off the bat, he's doing the admirable thing. Dude, I would say how great does Evans look, but it's not really him. How great is this tech that we believe that it is?
Yeah, I still don't quite understand how it works. I've watched some of the making of, and I think it's like they superimpose Evan's face onto like a real person that's actually that size.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it looks great. Like it looks pretty seamless. Like all the scenes where he takes his shirt off and stuff, and we get to see just how skinny he is. Like I think it all looks good. It never looks hokey. Um, it's very impressive to look at every time I see it.
Yeah, it's God bless. It's so good. This and they de-age Downey, they de-age Michael Douglas, and we've seen them do it a bunch. But I don't. This may have been the most. Is this the most impressive bit of CG they've done for one of their main characters? It has to be,
I think
right?
so. I mean, when we've seen other things, like we've seen them de-age Leia, we've seen them, de-age Luke for the Mandalorian, and it didn't look as good as this.
Yeah, I agree. I just think it. Wow, good lord, it just looks so incredibly well done. It is so incredibly well done. It's good stuff. Um, Also around this time, is when he goes into the theater. He's watching a newsreel from the war. There's a guy being a jerk in the crowd because, of course, there is. Because we got to see very early on, we got to establish a pattern that Steve is pretty much going to get bullied his whole life. He tells the guy to shut up. And of course, this guy stands up and he's towering over him. He's got him in the alley. He's giving him what for, right? And Steve instinctively grabs a trash can lid, which is going to play into this character for the next 10 years, holding it like a shield. And the guy says, at one point, says, "You just don't know when to give up, do you?" And he utters the now infamous line, "I could do this all day," which, Phil, I'm doubting was an actual phrase used in 1942. But in terms of this movie, for some reason it worked. And man, it became his catchphrase for years. Um, we see Bucky save him, and the next thing we see is they go to what's called the World Exposition of Tomorrow, which kind of feels like the World's Fair, but it's okay. You got to brand it, kids. You got to brand it. Bucky's got dates lined up for them. We see Howard Stark doing what his son would do years later to the tune of AC/DC. So it's great. He's got this car that uses what he calls Stark gravitic reverse technology. The car floats and then falls. And dude, talk to me about, first of all, how freaking amazing does all this look? This looks like there's thousands of people there. It looks like it's actually happening during that time period. Dominic Cooper is freaking killing it here. Everything looks great. The dynamic between Bucky and Steve, dude, all this is just gold. I love it.
Yeah, I really like the dynamic between Bucky and Steve in these scenes. I really love that visual of Steve walking up to the display with like all of the army men and trying to look like he's among them, and his face is below the collar line. Um, yeah, that stuff is just so good. And yeah, I think Stark in those scenes looks great. I mean, um, trying to do the floating car, and of course, that's a callback to later. We get the floating car in the Agent of Shield television show.
Yes. And you know what this made me think of when this happened was the idea that Howard couldn't quite get there with what he wanted to do, but then Tony could later. Like what Howard was missing, Tony figured out after the fact. Like of course he did. He's his father's son. This kind of feels like one of those callbacks to me too.
Yeah, I feel like that there was. I feel like it's a callback also to the first Iron Man movie and how we got to see Tony tinker until things worked.
Yeah.
Um, we got to see all of his little prototypes before they became polished.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Like father, like son, man. I just love that Marvel's laying the foundation for this. It's good stuff. And Iron Man's already happened. So now you get to see this in those terms, like reverse engineering Tony's dad. But it still works. It works. Like you said, Steve wanders off. I don't know if that tech existed then or not, but man, it looks awesome. In this universe, it did exist. It is Howard's, expo. So, of course he's got to have cool stuff with there. There's a recruitment office there at the expo, which is pretty cool. I mean, they're getting all hands on deck for the war, I suppose. And of course, Steve's going to try again. And Dr. Erskine happens to walk out and hears Steve telling Buck, men are laying down their lives. You know, I I got to do the same. You know, I got no right to not do the same or whatever he says. Um, but then we get hit with another great one-liner. This time between these characters, where Bucky tells him he got his orders. He's going out tomorrow, and Bucky says, "Don't do anything stupid till I get back." And Steve says, "How can I? You're taking all the stupid with you." And so they hug, and one says punk, and the other one says jerk, and Steve says, "Be careful, don't win the war till I get there." And Bucky leaves with both girls because of course he does. And Erskine has overheard this whole thing, and dude, at that point, he's already picked Steve, hasn't he?
The thing I think that is great about these initial scenes with Steve is that we don't live in a time where you're drafted anymore, right? Where
Right.
it wasn't your choice to go to war. Um, we live in a day and age where most people make the choice to join the army or Marines or whatever armed forces they join. Um, so to have this guy at a time where you weren't given a choice, and he decided with even with his stature that he wanted to do the right thing and he wanted to go and fight for his country. And that just says everything about who Steve is as a character.
Yeah, you get it right off the bat. When he obviously can't do it, he doesn't have the body for it. He doesn't have the strength for it. He's got all these physical ailments.
Yeah,
It's
and
crazy.
man, because I'm just sitting thinking, like, let me tell you, I have never, ever wanted to join the army, ever.
No,
Like,
me
it's
neither.
never been something I wanted to do.
No. Did they come after you in high school? Did they come after you where you are like they come after us here? Because in high school, they were all over us, man.
No, I never really got the recruitment stuff here.
Wow.
I know they did like some recruitment drives, but I never got really pressed for it. Um, but I'm just sitting thinking, like, most people, once they figured out that they're ineligible to be drafted, that's it. They feel like they've got, they were lucky. They don't have to go to
Yeah.
war. Um, but for this guy to be like, no, that's not enough. I deserve a chance to go and stand up for my country. Um, it's inspiring. It's just who he is as a character. And I mean, I know some people might look at it as like, whatever, like extreme patriotism or jingoism or whatever else you want to put it. But I think when you look at it in its basic terms, like what makes Steve a hero isn't just that he wants to go to war and fight somebody or fight some foreigners. I think it's that he always, regardless if he had the means to do it or not, he always wanted to do the right thing.
Yeah. He he's already to the point that Thor was not at. It took Thor losing his hammer, losing his powers, and getting sent to Earth to get to the point that Steve's already at here. He's already mature enough that he's going to do the right thing. It's crazy how that worked.
I mean, yeah, and we can jump ahead into this franchise and what makes Steve worthy. Um, man, it's just the fact that he was willing to stand up when he didn't have anything. Um, and I mean, that is just perfect what you're saying with Thor. Thor does not know what it's like to be Steve and have to feel powerless because he's always been powerful. He's always been the son of a god. He's always been, a demigod. Um, but Steve, he knows what it's like to be seen as inferior. He knows what it's like to be seen as less than, and he never was down on himself. He always felt like I want to do the right thing because that's what we're here for.
It's funny because later on, when Erskine is telling him why he chose him, he's like, a strong man wouldn't appreciate it. And I'm thinking that reminds me of Thor. Thor wouldn't have appreciated receiving something like this because he was already strong. Like,
Yeah,
what did he care?
he was born gifted.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't appreciate it as much. No.
Yeah, that's a great little dichotomy between the two characters for sure. Dr. Erskine pulls him aside. Steve thinks he's in trouble. The MP, he sees a sign on the door talking about it's against the law to falsify a document, and he's going to get his clothes on and split, dude. And the MP shows up. He's like, "Oh crap!" So here comes Erskine, and he's talking to him, and uh, he figured, of course, he figures he's done for, and Dr. Erskine introduces himself as being from the Strategic Scientific Reserve, which of course is the forerunner of Shield. Steve asks, "Where are you from?" And Erskine says, "Queens." Of course, he's speaking with a German accent. Erskine has the files, and apparently Steve tried 5 different times to join, and 5 different times he was classified 4F. He had changed where he was from, tried to hide in the paperwork. And Erskine asked him, "Do you want to kill Nazis?" And Steve says, "Is this a test?" He goes, "Yes." And he says, "I don't want to kill anyone. I don't like bullies." Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. That, Phil, to me, is the thesis of this character. That's why he wanted to do this. He knew what it was like to be pushed around, to be punched in the face for no good reason, to be pushed on the ground, to be treated like dirt. He didn't want that to happen to anybody else, so he was willing to stand up and put his life on the line if he had to. I think that right there encapsulates Steve. I don't like bullies. I don't care where they're from. And he tells him, "I will give you a chance. It's only a chance." He says, "I'll take it." So Erskine stamps the form 1A and says, "Congratulations, soldier." And that man, when he breathes that sigh of relief after getting stamped 1A, that's a great moment for him.
Yeah, I feel like all of this stuff, man, we can. I mean, you can say a lot about everything else that happens later in this movie, but I feel like the initial scenes of us getting introduced to Steve is what makes him such a great character. And I came away from the Avengers franchise, not just because of this movie and his trilogy, but I say a lot that I feel like Captain America is my favorite Avenger coming away, and he's the most likable character in the entire franchise to me. Um, I just feel like Chris Evans is just so perfect in the role, and whatever you can say about Robert Downey Jr. And we root for Iron Man for very different reasons because he's a very complicated man. But in the same way that I feel like people want to believe in Spider-Man because he represents something, I don't know, just something motivating in all of us that anybody can stand up and be a hero. And I feel like Captain America hits that same note because he's just a skinny kid from Queens, and he just represents that anybody can be a hero, anybody can pick up a shield, or anybody can be worthy.
Yeah. Brooklyn.
Yeah, Brooklyn. Sorry.
Yeah. Peter's Queens. Dude, that's one of my favorite moments in any Marvel movie ever. "Where you from, kid?" "Queens." And he just gets that look, and he's like, "Brooklyn." It's so good. It's just so freaking great, man. I can't get enough of that. Just that understanding. Oh, I get it. I get it now. Small world, huh, kid? That's just that great moment. It's good stuff. Talk about jumping ahead. That's me. So the next scene's not so fun because we get Dr. Zola with Schmidt. Schmidt takes a test rack, puts it in this massive machine he's got. I mean, we kind of figure out, Phil, they're going to try to build weapons with this thing using the power of the space stone. Schmidt cranks it all the way up. The power is immense. Zola says this will change the war. Schmidt says it will change the world. So we get the feeling that something bad is getting ready to go down. This is at the point where we get to meet Peggy Carter for the first time. And dude, one of my favorite characters who ends up having no bearing on the story at all, Gilmore Hodge, the unsung bully of this film. I'm waiting on his story, and I hope that we see it at some point because this character kind of figures out there's a lot more going on here than just him. But, we don't know this, Phil, at the time, but they've got this guy pegged as being the one that's going to get the super soldier serum. She walks up and starts talking, and he's like, "What's with the accent, Queen Victoria? I thought I'd signed up for the U.S. Army." And she's like, "What's your name, soldier?" "Gilmore Hodge, Your Majesty." That right there cracks me up every time. He's so effortless, smug, cocky. He's hitting on her like crazy. And of course, she takes him down with one punch. Gilmore Hodge, dude, in another world is Captain America. Can you imagine that?
He's Guy Gardner.
Yes, he is Guy Gardner. Perfect.
He's Guy Gardner.
Oh my God. Like the Ring chose that guy? Like that's him. Oh, that's good.
He's totally Guy Gardner here to Steve's Hal Jordan. Um,
Oh, wow.
he, yeah, I think he's great in these scenes. I think more importantly, Peggy is great in the fact that she immediately asserts herself, and that's just what makes her a fantastic character for the remainder of the franchise.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, we get to see her test of strength right out the gates. That's good stuff. We get to meet Colonel Phillips, of course, Tommy Lee Jones. He said, "I can see that you are breaking into the candidates. That's good." Then he gives this great speech where he says, "General Patton has said that wars are fought with weapons, but they are won by men. We're going to win this war because we have the best." And then he looks at Steve and says, "Men," and just kind of says it half-heartedly. Um, Phil says that the one man will be chosen, a super soldier. He will personally escort Adolf Hitler to the gates of hell, which is another great line. And then, Phil, we get the great flagpole scene. First man to bring me that flag gets a ride back to base with Agent Carter. Nobody's gotten that flag in 17 years. Steve's smart enough to take the pin out. The flagpole falls to the ground. He gets the flag off the pole, hands it to Sarge, says, "Thank you, sir," and then climbs into the Jeep with Peggy Carter. Just great because he knows he can't do what they're all trying to do, so he just finds a way around it.
Yeah, I feel like this was the first scene where we got to see that it wasn't just that Steve is brave and all these other things like virtuous, that he is actually just smart. He's a smart guy. He was the only one that just kind of looked at it like, nah, just ingenuity. Just pull these parts out. Flagpole falls over. Job done.
That's like there's a bit that David Tell has had for years where he talks about he's not going to ask directions from a guy that's walking normally. He's going to ask directions from the guy that's limping because he'll know the quickest and easiest way there. And that kind of feels like this. Where like, who else would you ask to get this flag down? It's not the big burly guy that works out and he's strong as an ox, but the guy that's had to use his brain for years to avoid getting, destroyed by bullies. Of course, he's going to find a way around it. So it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, this was the first time that we see that he's smart enough to figure out something without just punching it.
Right, right. Which makes him a great leader later on for sure. This great conversation between Phillips and Erskine, which is just phenomenal. And I don't think they get enough credit here. The two guys, Tommy Lee Jones and Stanley Tucci, just play off each other so well. He says, "You're not really thinking about picking Rogers, are you?" Phillips says, "I wasn't just thinking," or excuse me, Erskine says, "I wasn't just thinking about it. He's the clear choice." And Colonel Phillips says, "When you brought a 90-pound asthmatic onto my base, I let it slide. I thought, whatever, maybe he'll be useful to you like a gerbil. Never thought you'd pick him." And he says, "Stick a needle in that kid's arm, it'll go right through." And he says, and he's watching Steve do jumping jacks, and he says, "Look at that. He's making me cry." It's so great. Just the way he delivers that line, man. I was cracking up when he said that. So awesome. Uh, and then Phillips tells him, again, we go back to our boy, Hodge, and he says, "Hodge passed every test. He's big, he's fast, he obeys orders, he's a soldier." Erskine says, "He's a bully." And Phillips says, "You don't win wars with niceness, Doctor." And there's a major scene coming up, Phil. This may be the best scene of the movie. It's definitely one of the best scenes of any Marvel film that they've done to this point, and it's the grenade scene. Colonel Phillips throws a dummy grenade out and yells, "Grenade!" Everyone runs from it, including Hodge, and Steve dives onto it. Dude, how freaking great is this moment?
Again, I feel like there are a lot of reasons why Steve is my favorite member of the Avengers, and I feel like this just encapsulates why Steve is who he is, and that not just anybody could be Captain America. And I tell you what, when you watch this scene and then you realize the fact that Steve picked Sam, I tell people all the time um, what it means that somebody that we've seen do as many great things as Steve did with Pick Sam. And again, when there's there are a handful of scenes that I legitimately cried watching a Marvel movie. And when he handed Sam the shield, I legitimately cried because you could see just how much he believed in Sam.
Yeah. I mean, and dude, it's coming from Cap. Like you said, that's a major, it's validation, right?
It's not just that we know who Captain America is and that Captain was like, I want you to be next in line. It's that we know how Steve was picked for the role. We know everything that Steve went through to earn the role of Captain America.
Yeah, because it wasn't just handed to him, and he's not just handing it to Sam. He feels like Sam's earned it.
Yeah, and I mean, we can get into tons of things like that about, the, Captain the Falcon and Winter Soldier show and the things that Sam did and why Steve saw something special in him. But just rewatching Captain America for this podcast and just revisiting that and just remembering everything that Steve meant and just all the stuff we watched him do and just for him to say, "No, this is the guy. This is the guy that I want to lead you guys when I'm gone."
Yeah. Wow.
It just means a lot. I mean, watching him jump on that grenade, I feel like it's not just that he is special because he's brave, it's that um he believes in his fellow man in a way that nobody else I think in that camp did.
Oh, good point. Yeah. Because to them, they were just in the army, and they're there to beat Nazis up or whatever. And he's there for the right reasons. God, man, that's good. Um, what's funny to me about this moment is when Hodge looks up over the Jeep where he had been taking cover behind it because he ran, of course. He's got this look on his face, and if he had said out loud, "Well, I guess I'm not getting it," because that would have been hilarious. Because I think he knew in that moment, yeah, they're not picking me. Like, because I think it struck like the gravity of the moment struck him when he saw that happen. Like, yeah. And what's funny is he's laying there, I was going to call him Cap. Steve's laying there, and he says, "Is this a test?" And Erskine's smiling at Phillips, and Phillips just says, "He's still skinny," and he just walks off. Oh my God, freaking great, man. We get this great moment where the doctor visits Steve. He's got schnapps with him, and he's telling the story. He says people forget that the first countries the Nazis invaded were their own. He says that Hitler came to him and said, "You will make us strong," but he wasn't interested. So Hitler sent Schmidt, head of Hydra Research Division, to him. He says that Hitler uses his fantasies of the cult and power of Teutonic myth to inspire his followers, but Schmidt believes it's real. Erskine gives him the serum. It makes him stronger, but there were other effects. The serum was not ready. And then, Phil, we get the basically the gist of it here. The serum amplifies everything in you. So good becomes great, bad becomes worse. This is why you were chosen. A strong man who has known power all his life will lose respect for it, but a weak man knows the value of strength and knows compassion. That's why our friend and yours, Gilmore Hodge, probably shouldn't be, because really, and the Guy Gardner comparison is spot on. This is why John Walker is not a good Cap, because it's going to amplify what's already there.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, man, I really don't feel like that. I really don't feel like Falcon and the Winter Soldier gets the credit it deserves for being just a great piece of this franchise. I mean, you can say a lot about how good the trilogy is, but I feel like that show is by extension everything that Steve stood for, and he never stepped foot on that show.
Very true. Very true. I mean, his shadow looms large over that show, but not in such a way where it bogs it down. Like you're always kind of thinking about him, but you're thinking about him for the right reasons. And it really does become Sam and Bucky's show. It's not really it is about Steve, but it's not. Dude, we always brag on Marvel, but this is the genius of who they hand their properties to, that they were able to pull that off. and it didn't become monopolized by a guy that's no longer even in the MCU. So that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like John Walker's character and his fall from grace doesn't feel as big, and it doesn't hit the same notes if we don't know why Steve carrying that shield um meant what it meant. Um I mean, we get the moment we get with John where he murders the guy, and it doesn't feel as shameful him doing that with that shield if we didn't see Steve carry it with such pride.
Yeah, everything. God, man, there's so many layers to this story, and we couldn't appreciate at the time of this film, dude, how many layers there were going to ultimately be because of that show in and of itself. I mean, a lot of the stuff that's laid in this movie is revisited later, and the themes that are laid out for us all to see, to witness firsthand, compound and mean so much later. Yeah, it's like the butterfly effect, the ripple effect of one thing leading to another. I mean, it
Yeah.
really does
Um
matter.
yeah, for sure. I'm telling you, there's so many emotional notes in this movie and what it means for the rest of the franchise. And it's so interesting because the Captain America movie is the last one right before the Avengers. And I feel like in a lot of ways, Cap is the heart and soul of the team. Like he's the moral backbone of the team.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. 100%. Without him, it's not the same Avengers, which, losing Tony is terrible. His sacrifice saved the universe or saved the world. Probably saved everybody because it stopped Thanos hopefully for good. But like, and it's terrible to lose him. But the Avengers, as much as it sucks, would have continued it because of Cap. But like without Cap, it's game over. Like you can't. I mean, dude, the Avengers with Tony in charge would probably be fine because it's a different Tony. It's a different day. He's humble. He's learned. He's grown as a man and as a hero. But like you said, dude, Steve is the moral compass, and if he's gone, you take him out of the equation, it's a much different Avengers team.
I would actually challenge you to say that the Avengers would not be what they were without Steve. If if Steve wasn't there, um, he doesn't challenge Tony. Tony does not force the warhead into the portal at the end of Avengers, for example. Um,
Mm.
I don't think that he does the right thing even in Endgame. I mean, maybe he might have gotten to the point where he was ready to make that sacrifice. But again, it all started because Steve challenged him in the first Avengers movie. And he said, "You're not the guys that would lay down and no, you would just try to outsmart it like you try to outsmart everyone."
Good point. Good call. Yeah, he planted the seeds because, like we said, there's so many layers to these characters and these stories. Yeah, he planted the seeds for that years ago. Man, yeah, you're right. It probably wouldn't even have worked without him. And Nick Fury knew that too.
Yeah. And I feel like a part of why um I feel like a part of why Steve franchise I mean not franchise. I feel like the reason why he irritates Tony so much is because I think that in some ways he's inspired by him. And I feel like he is, of course, too arrogant to ever admit that. But I feel like the way they play off each other and their dynamic for the entire franchise, just plays into what Tony sees in himself and just what Steve means to everybody around him.
It's funny. You talk about how he impacted Tony. Think about how he impacted Natasha, how he impacted Bruce. And it was, dude, something as simple as he's just so sincere. Like the first time he meets Bruce, they shake hands on the helicarrier, and he says, "Word is that you know how to track this thing or whatever." And Bruce kind of nods and says, "Is that the only word about me?" And Cap says, "It's the only one I care about." And I'm like,
Yep.
dude, like Bruce's defenses are up. He knows what people think of him and what they believe, and they're probably terrified. And right off the bat, here's this guy that is exactly as advertised. He's the clean cut American soldier who really does have a good heart. And man, that's got to be, it makes Bruce feel welcome to be with the team. And like, had he not had that said to him, You know what I mean? Just little things that they planted the seeds all through the Avengers movie.
Yeah. Um, yeah, for sure. He never talks down to anybody as a leader. I mean, you can make a case that he talks down to Tony a little bit,
Yeah.
but I don't. I feel like a lot of it is him being contentious enough with Tony and challenging him enough to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we know that it goes south from here for sure, because after Dr. Erskine's visit, he basically tells him before he leaves, says, no matter, you got to promise me something, no matter what happens tomorrow, promise me that you will stay who you are, not a perfect soldier, but a good man. He points to Steve's chest, which will come back later. We flash back or flash to Zola, Dr. Zola, and Johann Schmidt. Things are getting weird, Phil. Schmidt has found Erskine in the United States. They're equipping these ships. They're talking about the Valkyrie. They're powering weapons. Dr. Zola doesn't understand why Schmidt cares so much about him. He believes the serum is the only defense against the power that we now possess. If we take that away from them, then our victory is assured. And he says, "Shall I give the order?" And Schmidt says, it's already been done. It's already been given," which means there's a guy on the inside. Um, and so this guy, dude, this artist has been painting his portrait. And when the light comes on, Schmidt says, "What do you think?" And Dr. Zola, against his better judgment, says, "A masterpiece." By this time, we've kind of figured out that, because we see him in shadow, you can't keep looking at his soul. Dude, apparently, you can't just look at an Infinity Stone too awful much, because it will do this to you, which it did. I mean, that's kind of startling. Did we see that in any other Marvel film where, like, we knew you couldn't wield the power of a stone, but just looking at it screwed you up? Did that happen anywhere else?
I don't think that it did.
Crazy. Yeah, I don't get that. It's funny because Peggy and Steve are going to where they have to do the serum. Steve recognizes the neighborhood. I got beaten up over there. I got beaten up right there in that parking lot. They have this great little conversation, and I think this is probably maybe the first time that Peggy starts feeling a little something something for him. She can relate to Steve's predicament. She knows what it's like to have every door shut in her face. Steve can't get his words out. She says, "This the first you don't know how to talk to women, do you?" And he says, "To be honest, I think it's the longest conversation I've ever had with one." This is where the line about dancing gets mentioned for the first time. He said, "Asking a woman to do it always seemed so terrifying. He figured he'd wait." And she says, "Wait for what?" And he says, "On the right partner." And Phil, because they connect the dots, they're going to revisit that later. They get to this storefront. There's an old lady running the joint. She says it's wonderful weather they're having. Carter says yes, but I always carry an umbrella, which is secret 1942 code for "We're the military. Please let us in." So they do. She buzzes them in. Secret bookcase opens because secret bookcases are fun. And they're now in the bowels of the SSR. What's great about this scene, Phil, is that room that's bustling with scientists and lab coat types falls silent when Steve walks in, because they're like, "Oh, there's the guinea pig. We see him." Dude, that was like, it's a very subtle moment, but man, that was good stuff right there. It's like they knew, here's the lab rat. So that's good stuff. We get to see the insider, or the mole. We don't know he's a mole yet. The State Department gentleman named Fred Clemson, a very prim and proper dude, be spectacled and everything. We meet Senator Brandt. He looks down at Steve and says, "Jesus, somebody get this kid a sandwich," which is a great line. Steve gets into this machine, which I think, dude, correct me if I'm wrong. Does this machine pay homage to the books? Is this what they put him in the comic? Wasn't he just lying on a table when he got the serum in the book?
I thought in the book, but I mean they've done it different ways in the book.
Sure.
Um, I don't know, because I've seen books where he just took the serum directly. I've seen it where he's hooked up to a machine. I don't know. I'm trying to remember. It might be close to what I remember from Captain America's origin and Ultimates.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that.
But I I'm drawing a blank. I haven't read Ultimates in a long time.
Right, right. Well, we know what happens next, kids. He gets put in this thing, but first they inject him. These injections that are getting put in there. The doctor addresses everyone there and says that these getting micro injections will cause immediate cellular change to stimulate growth. The subject will be saturated with the very famous Vita rays, which is a great nod to the books, which is awesome that they kept that in there. It's a comic book science field that means nothing,
Yep.
but it works. Um, it's funny because we have what will come to be revisited later as a what if moment when Dr. Erskine asks Peggy, "Wouldn't you be more comfortable in the booth?" And she goes, "Of course," as if to say, "This is men's work. Your kind shouldn't be down here. You women folk got to get out the way." But in the what if series, she said, "Nah, I believe I'm okay down here." And then we know what happens there. So watching this movie again made me think of that. Um, he gets one injection. Steve says, "It wasn't bad." Doc says that was penicillin, which is great. The injections happen, the doors close, and then it's like a horror movie because he's screaming and she's out of her seat. They're all telling him to kill the power. Steve yells, "No, I can do this." And then when the case opens again, Phil, we get Chris Evans, honest to God, Chris Evans, 6'3", whatever he is, 240 ripped, solid muscle, freaking huge. I mean, it's crazy. He looks CG'd. Forget the skinny guy. This guy looks CG'd to me. Phillips says the SOB did it. Carter says, "How do you feel?" And another great one-liner, taller. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, man, again, that's a part of um, what's so fantastical about this movie, and again, just the way that it's shot. Him coming out of the machine for the first time, um, and man, he's in phenomenal shape for this movie, of course. But I just
Oh,
think just the way that he's shot and um, the contrast between the Steve that we've been introduced to and him coming out of the machine, like they could have easily um, did like a short montage and cut straight to him coming out of the machine, but it wouldn't have felt as earned if we didn't see Steve go through the journey to earn the serum and then come out of it, as the Captain America that we know.
I mean, this guy's 4F 5 different times with a history of health problems or ailments or diagnosis. I mean, he should have felt pain. This should not have been easy. I mean, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Such a frail guy for sure. We're going to take this next bit in a little bit of bulk here. Basically, the spy, I guess, is what we're calling him. This Nazi. He detonates the place or attempts to shoot Dr. Erskine. When Erskine hits the floor, this is a moment we pointed out earlier. He points to Steve's chest as if to say, "Stay who you are, a good man." Steve always will, by the way. Spoiler alert, kids. Captain America does not go heel, which is very good for all of us. Um, Carter goes out into the street and even through distraction, massive distraction, shoots the driver. Like, she's a dead shot, man. Who would have thunk it? But holy God. Like, yeah, she could have been Captain America easy or Captain Britain. That'd have been great. So basically, what happens is Steve chases the Nazi down. It's great because he doesn't know he's moving that fast, but he is moving. He runs faster. He's moving like Usain Bolt. If he tapped into the speed verse it's crazy. The Speed Force. He's killing it, jumping on cars, floating through the air. It looks like we get the first time. The second time we see him holding some semblance of a shield. This time it's a car door with a star on it, which is a not so subtle nod as to what's coming. We know that the spy attempts to get away, and he's caught, and he bites down a cyanide capsule, and he's dead. So yeah, it's a great sequence. One of the highlights of the film for me. It's freaking great. He even grabs a kid and attempts to use him against Cap. That's not going to work. Yeah, a great sequence here. Another foreshadowing of the Shield. Steve kind of figures out who he's going to become. I mean, it's like you know, not having legs your whole life, and then one day you can walk. Like he's just has that look like, man, I'm alive. I'm really alive now. Like all that other stuff leading up to this was not life. That was me barely existing, and now I'm alive. It was like a coming out of the cocoon, man. Good stuff.
Yeah. Sometimes when I was watching this, I thought of the behind the scenes images we saw when they first started filming the movie, and they showed Chris Evans walking around with like those like whatever those footies he had over his feet to make it look like he had bare feet. And they just look so weird.
Oh
I don't know
yeah.
why I always think about that. Like he had like those rubber things over his feet. And watching it now and just thinking that he's running down the street barefoot. I don't know how they switched it. Um, but I don't know, man. It's just such a weird thing every time I see this scene.
Ah, don't blow it for me. I never even noticed that before.
No, I mean you can't even notice it when you watch the movie. Like it looks like he's running with his bare feet, but when I've seen like behind the scenes stuff, like he has like these rubber footies on his feet.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, dude, it's a great scene. It's just that again, he's becoming who he's going to become later. He's realizing what he can do. The scene after this, we figure out that, you know, he's uh, Schmidt's gone rogue. He's he gets visited. I guess Hitler sends his guys, shut this dude down. He's getting a little bit too big for his britches, as my mom would say. We got to put him in his place, and it's hilarious because the one Nazi says he's looking at the map with pins in it, and he goes, "Berlin is on this map." Like he's, oh my god! And they realize this guy's freaking bad news, and he uses these weapons and just I evaporates them. I don't know how better to say it, but yeah, it's obvious. Um, Basically, we go back here to Cap after we see what goes on with Johann Schmidt, who's on his way to become the Red Skull, obviously. And Colonel Phillips tells Agent Carter that the SSR is being retested or and relocated, and they're going to be reassigned. They're flying to London. So is Howard Stark. Steve wants to go, obviously, but he's going to Alamogordo instead. Phillips says, "I asked for an army. All I got was you, and you are not enough." Senator Brandt, that we met earlier, comes to Steve, and Phil, he gives him a great pitch. "How'd you like to fight on the most important battlefield of the war?" He said, "It's all I've ever wanted." And then we get to see Steve Rogers, Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, in the classic comic book accurate Captain America suit with the boots. And people can make fun of this as much as they want to. I think he looks great. I'm sorry, but I love the boots. I'm an old school comic book guy. I'm sorry, dude. I love this costume. I know why you can't do it in this day and age because you got to do the, the leather and the straps and the chain mail, and it's got to be form fitting. But man, I'm a sucker for this. I think it looks great, man. And just I mean, he's touring the country. He's getting his. We see this montage. What's a movie without a montage?
Star Spangled Man with a Plan.
Oh,
Like I love this stuff. It's all this stuff that kind of the hokiness that again that we get from Rocketeer, and it's here in this movie, and I feel like it's done in such a great way that you can tell all of the stuff that it's riffing off of. Um, you have the like you said the comic accurate suit. You have the original shield, like the triangle shield, and he's reading all his lines off the back of the shield. Um, it's great. Um, Him, coming behind the dancing ladies, it's just it's just great.
oh, it's so good. We see him touring the country, and we see a guy dressed as Hitler. We see the Captain America dancers, which is awesome. I got to get me some of those. Just imagine every room you go into, they're dancing your way in. That's an entrance right there, kids. I'm telling you. Um, so good stuff. I mean, he's getting more comfortable as he goes on. He's selling war bonds. It's working, doing great. And then he's in Italy in 1943, 5 miles from the front, in front of honest to God soldiers who are bleeding and dying in this war. And the shtick doesn't go over too well. They're heckling him. One of them moons him, and they're throwing produce. Phil, they brought produce because when you go to a show, it's always good to bring rotten produce because you never can tell how it's going to end. So you got to be ready for anything. And he's like, bring the girls back out. He's like, well, I think they just know the one song, but he's, that accommodating look he has, like, well, I'll go look, I'll go get them. It's freaking great, man. I love it. Good stuff. So he goes and gets the girls, and then later on we see him sketching himself as a monkey on a unicycle, wearing the Captain America outfit. Peggy comes up out of the blue. She's giving him a pet talk, telling him it was meant for more. Steve says he dreamed about being on the front lines and serving his country. He finally got everything he wanted, and he's wearing tights. And then he comes to find out that the same battalion that Bucky was placed in was a 107th, that they went up against Schmidt, 200 of them, and less than 50 returned. And then it's on. Steve snaps up, asks Phillips if James Barnes was on the list of the dead. Phillips says the name sounds familiar, which is interesting. Did they ever clarify why Bucky's name sounded familiar to Colonel Phillips?
I don't think they do.
Which is interesting because it would kind of lead Steve to believe he's dead. Steve wants to know if there's a rescue mission being planned. He said he's told it's too dangerous. He calls Steve a chorus girl. Still, he's just getting dissed by Colonel Phillips here, man. Steve decides to go after him. Peggy tries to stop him, but he won't have it. One of the dancers' helmets is missing, hence the new outfit. Steve has the leather jacket and the helmet and the suit and the goggles, and now we're talking about Captain America from the Ultimates, which is all kinds of awesome. And we get to see Peggy and Howard airlifting Steve where he needs to be. She gives him a transponder. The signal will lead them straight to him. Howard talks about he and her going out for fondue. Steve gets the notion, oh, these two are together. And it looks like they are. She gets this look like she's a little embarrassed. And the Nazis begin firing on the ship. Cap decides to jump. She wants to take him all the way in. He says, turn around and get out of here once I'm free. She says, you can't give me orders. He says, the hell I can't. I'm a captain. Very tongue-in-cheek. Red Skull is equipping the ships with weapons. They're using prisoners to do so. They are readying the Valkyrie. Again, we see the Howling Commandos here for the first time. We talked about them earlier. They're being held captive. What's great is Cap is snuck on to this secret base or this camp, wherever they are. He jumps into a truck and is faced with two Hydra soldiers. He disposes of both of them. He's in. He finds the weapons. He grabs a pistol clip. The prisoners see him. They say, who are you supposed to be? And he goes, Captain America. And it's hilarious because he just sticks with it. And what's great is that Dugan has just a tiny bit of moment of racism here, and it's quelled pretty quickly because he sees the one guy that's going to be with him who's Asian American. He says, what, are we taking everybody? Which is a very sideways comment. He goes, I'm from Fresno, Ace, which is awesome. Kind of puts him in his place. Steve asks about Bucky. He's told there's an isolation ward, but no one's ever come back from it. He gives them orders, and he's asked, do you know what you're doing? He says, yeah, I've knocked out Adolf Hitler over 200 times. So the guys are going to escape. They're using the weapons that the Nazis have that are powered by the Space Stone. And he finds Bucky. Let me ask you, Phil, have they clarified what was done to Bucky in the meantime? Was the brainwashing beginning and we don't know? Was this cleared up later on?
No, they never really explained what they were doing with Bucky in that facility or what was going on there.
It's crazy because I kind of assumed it all happened after the train, but when this happened, and you could tell he was not himself after this. I mean, it just, I don't know if the programming had begun or what. He gets Bucky off the table. He says, I thought you were dead. Bucky says, I thought you were smaller. Because at first, if you notice, Bucky is looking down. But then when Steve stands upright, he realizes that Steve is way taller. And he says, what happened to you? He says, I joined the army. And Bucky says, did it hurt? He says, a little. And he says, permanent? And he says, so far. So I think he's getting the gist of what's going on here. Schmidt sees Cap and Bucky on the catwalk above everything. He says he's a big fan of the films, which is hilarious. He says that, I see Dr. Erskine managed to do it. Not exactly an improvement, but still impressive. Cap punches him. And dude, we begin to see the phony skin, the face begin to come off. And he says, no matter what Erskine told you, I was his greatest success. And then he takes the face off, and Bucky says, great moment. Bucky says, you don't have one of those, do you? So that's freaking great. Very comical. Schmidt says they've left humanity behind, and that unlike him, he said, unlike you, I embrace it proudly without fear. And Cap, because he tells it like it is, says, then why are you running? Which is great. Skull gets into the rocket. He gives Zola the keys to his ride. Dude, this rocket got to be a nod to the original origin story in which Bucky and Cap were hanging on the rocket, and this is how Bucky dies. So I assume that's why this rocket's in here.
Yes, I noticed that right away. And when they didn't do the rocket thing, I was like, that's interesting. But then again, the way they handle Bucky in the movie is interesting because Bucky is older. In the comic, Bucky is younger than Cap.
Yeah.
In this, they're
Yeah.
the same age, right?
Yeah, they are for sure. Interesting. Yeah. Um, so basically, the place goes up in flames. Zola gets away, and so does Schmidt. Phillips and the others believe that Cap is dead. They're sending a wire to DC to let them know. Here comes Cap and Bucky with the Howling Commandos. Dude, Hodge, once again, I think this last time we see him actually, Hodge is among the soldiers that are still there, and he looks at everyone returning. Dude, I desperately want to see Gilmore Hodge's story, and I want it to have a happy ending. Like, dude, the what if people have to get this, man. Like, there has to be something, even if only that he became a nice guy later because of being around Steve. There's got to be something. Got to give me a bone to chew on here, man. Um, yeah, I just want this guy's story. Cap tries to surrender himself for disciplinary action, and Phillips smiles at him, says that won't be necessary. Dude, this next moment feels like the turning point of the movie for me when Senator Brandt is going to present Cap with the Medal of Valor, but he's not there. We get the obligatory Stan Lee cameo as a general who says, uh, I thought he'd be taller, which was awesome. Very cool. Does this not feel like that the third act of the film is beginning here, or should I say the second act is beginning here?
Yeah. Yeah. There's just so many cool parts about this, like him walking back into camp with all of the soldiers behind him. Man, that scene is just so cool to me.
When he was, they were all huddling around him and he was smiling. I think that's one of the first still photos I saw from this movie.
Man, again, him walking back in with all the soldiers behind him and being accepted for the first time is just like, just him being accepted for the first time in the army is just like, man, I feel like it's one of the best scenes in the movie.
It's all he wanted, right? It's all he ever wanted. He didn't ask to be special. He didn't ask to be more than. He just wanted to be equal. He wanted to do his part, and he was doing it for sure. Um, what's great is uh, not long after this, we see underground. They're making this plan to find Hydra's main base. Cap wants to put together his own team. Of course, the Howling Commandos. We talked about Dum Dum Dugan, Gabe Jones, Montgomery Fallsworth, Jim Morita, and Jacques Dernier, I think. Steve asks Bucky, are you ready to follow Captain America into the jaws of death? And he says, no. The little guy from Brooklyn who was too dumb to run away from a fight, I'm following him. Dude, these guys are bros for life. Like, there's just no doubt about it. He asks Steve, says, you're keeping the outfit, aren't you? And Steve says, it's kind of growing on me, which is a great moment. Peggy Carter shows up in a red dress, and and Jesus H is what I'll say. I'm a fan. I'm gonna leave it at that. Freaking great. And dude, this moment is so good because for the first time ever, Bucky has disappeared next to a woman and his best friend. She has no clue he's even there. Like she's all about Steve. This is so great stuff. He's trying to get her to dance. He says, what are you waiting for? And she says, the right partner. Bucky says, I'm invisible. I'm turning into you. This is a horrible dream. How'd this happen? And of course, Steve says, don't take it so hard. Maybe she's got a friend. Good stuff. What a great moment, man.
Yeah, I just love that scene of her walking in and all of the guys are turning around and looking at her.
Oh, go man! She takes the room over because whew, that's all. That's all. Yeah, great stuff. Anyway, um, things start to move a little fast from here. Like we're really starting to cook with gas. For the first time, Steve makes out with an actual girl in front of us. And man, she's not bad to look at either. And of course, here comes Peggy around the corner and catches him doing it. And of course, he has to throw back at her about Stark. He says, how do I know the two of you haven't been fondling? Which, of course, he didn't know what that meant. And then Stark has to be the one to tell him. Um, what's funny with this scene, he's got the table full of weapons and shields and stuff. It kind of reminded me of Q with James Bond. Like
Yeah.
he's got his weapons guys showing him his stuff, which is cool. He shows him some shields. Steve picks one that's kind of covered up, and yes, it's round, and yes, it's perfect. Is this the first time we hear the word vibranium mentioned in the MCU?
Uh, I think that Tony mentions it in Iron Man 2. I can't remember the
Mm.
timeline of Iron Man 2. Wait, no, Iron Man 2 had to have happened before Cap because we see the shield for the first time in Iron Man 2.
That's true, and Cap hadn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Iron Man was '08, Iron Man 2 was 10, Cap was 11, and then Avengers was 12.
Yeah.
And then Thor was Thor before? Thor was before.
Yeah. Thor was before Captain America.
Yeah, Thor was somewhere in front of there. Peggy picks up the gun. I mean, good thing the shield works, huh? Because she hits like 4 rounds into this shield. Um, yeah, and it's great because Howard has this look on his face. Steve has this look on his face, and without even looking at him, he hands him this drawing and says, "I got some ideas about the uniform." Howard says, "Yeah, whatever you want, pal." Like, because he sees how freaking upset Peggy is. We get another montage time, Phil. We get to see Cap with the Howling Commandos lighting it up, just taking down Nazis left and right. Really, really good stuff here. We see Phillips and Carter in a theater, and they're watching a newsreel. Steve has his watch opened, and of course, Peggy's picture is in it. And then we see Red Skull's reaction. Cap is basically ruining everything. He's mad at Dr. Zola. Zola says, I only develop the weapons, I don't fire them. So yeah, it's getting intense. And this leads to the train scene. So talk to me about the train scene. We get some foreshadowing here with Bucky holding the shield. Some cool moments here. It's down to him and Bucky both, but this is the moment that we lose Bucky in the MCU until Captain America 2. So, what do you think about this scene? They rappel down, which is freaking great. It's awesome. They zip line down to the train. Man, this is one of the coolest scenes in the film, I think.
Man, during that montage, you get that great scene of Steve kicking that door in, and he has all the Howling Commandos behind him, and he
Oh
takes
yeah.
that gun out and starts shooting. And that was in, I think, the second trailer. Um,
Yes.
and every time I think of this movie, like that's one of the images that pops up because that was the first time we kind of see him as like fully realized Cap.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And we mentioned during the Avengers episode, I think you brought up that Cap has killed men before. He was in the war. He's a killer. Like the rest of the Avengers besides Natasha, he's the one that's battle hardened for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, just yeah, great stuff. But yeah, this scene on the train, man, I mean, just the way they handle, Bucky's seemingly dying. Him using the shield and just all the notes it hits. Now, of course, anybody that's seen any movie ever, not even just a Marvel movie, just any movie ever, we don't see a body, so immediately assume Bucky's not dead. Um, and we just see him fall to his death. We never see what happens to him. But I just think it's good in this movie for what it meant to Steve and the first time he saw like a casualty and having it be somebody that he was so close to. Um, yeah, it's just a great scene.
Dude, Bucky was the one character they didn't mess with. They left him dead. And they basically, Marvel had basically said, you'll never see this character again. His death means too much to Steve. It means too much to the Captain America mythos. Bucky has to be dead. When they brought him back, forget the MCU for a minute. Think about the comics. Was it the right move bringing him back? Have there been enough great stories told that it warranted him coming back, or should they have just left him dead?
In the comics,
Yeah.
I would say so, but only because Ed Brubaker clearly cares a lot about the character, and he has left that character better than he was when he found him. You can tell that he grew up reading a lot of Captain America comics, and I mean, really, I have to admit, Brubaker is the guy that made me a Captain America fan. His run on the
Oh,
book
man.
is what got me into Captain America. Um, and not just that, you know, when I've seen him talk in interviews about being an army brat and growing up on bases, and him saying that, you know, he always saw himself in Bucky because he was a kid on an army base. And so, you know, you can tell how much it meant to him to bring this character back, and everything that happened after that, the Winter Soldier becoming this, you know, super popular character and all these things. Like I would say that it worked because of Brubaker.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Um, yeah, I'm just one of those. I don't know. Like, make it good, make it count. Jason Todd's not dead anymore. Well, you better make this count.
Yeah.
Like, it's the fans voted that he died. I know that's a silly little. It's a silly little tongue in cheek, callback to another publisher, but still, like, you gave the fans the choice and said, "Look, it's your call. Does he live or die?" And fans said, "The heck with this kid, kill him." And then years later, nah, he ain't dead. Okay, well then, all right. It's kind of feels like a pro wrestling move where it's like, hey, we're gonna give you what you want. We're just kidding. So yeah, it's just if the story's good, fine, but like don't screw the story up. And you're right. I don't think he did. I think they delivered. And of
Yeah.
course, we see what's happened in the MCU. It's been great.
Yeah. I mean, when I really think about all the great things that Bucky has been a part of, whether that be Falcon and Winter Soldier, um, and stuff like the books, like the Winter Soldier book, which was there's a solo book that was really good. There are parts of Brubaker's Captain America run where he takes on the mantle and he becomes Captain America. That was also very good.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just think that, you know, I feel like Bucky has kind of become, you know, his own character outside of just being, you know, a supporting character to Cap. I feel like he is, you know, one of the more popular characters to come out of the Brubaker book.
Yeah.
I feel like in a lot of ways, like when you think about Dick Grayson and how Dick Grayson has managed to come out of Batman's shadow and grow into his own character, I feel like with Brubaker's help, Bucky has become that.
Yeah, he's become credible enough and he's relevant enough to be his own man. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree. It's hard to argue that point. Um, Great moments here. We'll hit on them here, the high notes anyway. Zola's been captured. The Americans, the Allies, finally have him. Phillips is trying to give him the break. Basically says they've sent this coded telegram to DC, basically saying that Zola has flipped on Schmidt, hoping that he'll give him up, and he totally gives him up, which we kind of expected. Cap cannot get drunk, and I think it's interesting to note that the serum side effects are that well, maybe not side effects, but part of it is that he can't get drunk. But the serum actually causes regeneration and heals. And so, anytime there's an injury, he begins to heal and regenerate. I don't know if they've ever used the word regenerate again with Cap, but I just wonder if you cut off a finger, would it have grown back? Are we talking Wolverine level regeneration? Because, man, that's a whole different conversation. I mean, we never see him get hurt bad enough to have to use it, maybe. But like we saw him get thrown around quite a bit, so it would make sense that he's breaking ribs and maybe puncturing a lung here and there. But like we never really saw anything broken off of his body to see him grow it back. But dude, that's interesting. Regeneration. Like
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like he has sped up healing factor. I don't think that he can regenerate like limbs or anything like that if they're severed.
Yeah.
I think it's just like he heals faster than most.
In the midst of all this, we get the Red Skull in all his glory. They've mentioned this line twice about, chop off one head, two more will take its place. Um, when Peggy visits Steve, it's pretty intense because he's upset. She flat out tells him, Becky's death isn't your fault. Did you believe in your friend? Which kind of takes Steve off guard. He says, did you respect him? Then stop blaming yourself. Allow Barnes the dignity of his choice. He thought you were worth it. And dude, that comes back to haunt her later because of what happens aboard the Valkyrie. Cap is going after Schmidt. Nothing's going to stop him. Phillips and Stark are briefing the men. They have less than 24 hours till Hydra takes the weapons to the East Coast. Schmidt's base is in the Alps. And one of the guys says, what are we supposed to do? It's not like we can just knock on the front door. Cap says, why not? That's exactly what we're going to do. We see Cap on a motorcycle going through the woods. It's like Luke and Leia on the speeder bikes going through the jungles of Endor. It's freaking great. He takes out the Hydra soldiers. He gets onto the base. They, of course, take him hostage. Red Skull's talking to him. They talk about Erskine. Skull says that he resented his genius. He resented my genius. Tried to deny me what was rightfully mine. But he gave Cap everything. What makes you so special? Cap says nothing. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn. And Red Skull, for some reason, doesn't care for that too awful much. He lays into him a couple of times. Cap says, of course, I can do this all day. Man. He says, Skull says, of course you can. Dude, the way he cuts him off, it's almost like he knew he was going to say that.
Man, I did not think about it until I was just sitting here thinking that Bucky saves Steve's life on the train with the shield. And I mean, it goes all the way back to the beginning of the movie of how many times he saved him, from bullies when he was, skinny Steve. Man, and I feel like some parts of Steve's guilt in the scene later when he's drinking and later on is that I think in some ways he probably looks at it like he wouldn't have been there. He wouldn't have made it as far as he did without Bucky. And I mean, of course, that comes back in Winter Soldier, and it's part of why their relationship means so much. And even in the third movie, and why he's willing to go against everybody for Bucky, because this is the guy that he saved his life. And so, I mean, he literally died saving his life. Not just anybody can say that they died saving Captain America.
That's a good point. I mean, even in the end, when Cap was the stronger one, he still stepped up for him. Yeah, that's all kinds of crazy. This great moment where he's talking to Skull, and Skull says, "I'm on a tight schedule." And he says, "So am I," because getting taken hostage, dude. As smart as Johann Schmidt may be, as smart as Hydra is as a collective, they couldn't figure out that the world's greatest super soldier allowed himself to be captured. Those Hydra guys couldn't take him in a fair fight. None of them could. He's in there because it was a distraction so the other guys could bust in, which is perfect. Have a product or a service that you want to get out into the world? Always wanted to try your hand at podcasting but don't know where to start? We've got you covered. Pod for Hire is a podcast production company that offers turnkey services to fit your needs. We produce your show from start to finish, allowing you the valuable time you require to focus on your established clients as well as prospective clients. We pride ourselves on delivering a top-notch product that will set your business apart from the rest and give your company the exposure it deserves. For more information, give us a call at 1-828-800-9880 or email us at info@podforhire.com. Pod for Hire. We take the work out of podcasting. And so they bust in. We see Agent Carter and Colonel Phillips are in the woods with the rest of them. They storm the base. Hydra is taking them out, Phil. They're destroying them with all these weapons. Red Skull, of course, because he's a villain and he's going to live to fight another day, trying to get away. He's trying to board the Valkyrie to head for the East Coast. One soldier yells, cut off one head, two more, and then Phillips shoots him and says, let's go find two more, which is great. Freaking great. The Valkyrie is taken off. This is the scene you referenced earlier. They pick him up and she kisses him. Nice. I mean, it just, everything this guy had ever asked for. And this girl turned out to be the girl of his dreams. Finally gets to kiss her. Then he looks at Phillips and he says, I'm not kissing you, which is great. Cap gets on the ship. Dude, here's something that got me lost, and I'm going to tell you my theory. He sees the missiles. They've got the names of the cities painted on the heads of the missiles. One says Chicago, they're coming for you, Phil, look out.
Huh.
One says New York. And I'm like, why are they painting the names of the... And then it occurred to me, if we're talking about the 40s, like the Americans were painting things like logos on the planes, the pilots' names, they were painting things on the missiles, the Enola Gay, they were painting the names of the ships on the ships. I mean, was this sort of a callback to that maybe?
I guess so. I don't know.
It's weird. Did you find that weird? Because that stuck out to me when I watched this movie again.
I don't know that I really paid it that much attention. I'm just trying to... No, not really.
Because, who's that there for? Us? Maybe?
Yeah.
I guess?
Maybe so.
I don't know. It makes me wonder if there was an easy way to do it. We finally get the big boss scene where Cap and Skull go one-on-one. It's really, really good stuff. Skull says, you could have the power of the gods. You wear the flag on your chest and think you fight a battle of nation. Phil, just like any good villain, he talks himself to death. The hero's just trying to win. And like a great heel, he's just cutting his promo on him. You wear the flag on your chest and think you fight a battle of nations. I have seen the future, Captain. There are no flags. And Cap says, not my future. Cap knocks him into the ship's core. Skull takes the Tesseract. He's looked at it one too many times, I suspect, Phil, because this time it gives you a glimpse of space above the ship, which is crazy. He obviously cannot wield the power. No one can. And it takes him, and Phil, we don't know at the time, he's getting transported to Vormir, which is crazy. The cube falls through the bottom of the ship and just keeps melting through until it hits the ocean. Cap takes the reins of the ship. Peggy's talking to him. Wants to get Howard on the line to figure this out. He said it's moving too fast and it's heading for New York. I've got to put it in the water. She says, no, we can work this out. He says, if I wait any longer, a lot of people are going to die. And then a callback to the line that she gave him about Bucky. He says, Peggy, this is my choice. So it's like she can't fight it. He puts her pick on the console. He aims the ship down. And dude, this is some tearful stuff happening here. Because he'll be back. But seeing her get upset is upsetting. And he says he's going to need a rain check on that dance. She's crying. She says, okay, a week from next Saturday at the Stork Club. He says, you got it. She says, 8 o'clock on the dot. Don't you dare be late. He says, I still don't know how to dance. She says, I'll show you how. You just be there. And he says, we'll have the band play something slow. I'd hate to step on your... And then there's silence. The radio crackles. And dude, Tommy Lee Jones is standing there. He kind of lowers his head. He knows Cap's gone. It's over. Give me why, and I know the reason, I get it. Cap is a super soldier, and I get that he's crashing this thing into the Arctic. The problem was we just couldn't find him because the ship went under the water? Because you had to have known there would have been rescue missions to find him. I guess is that the answer? We just couldn't get to that area of the world because of the climate. Is that the answer? That's why we couldn't get him out?
I assume, of course, reading Captain America comics, you assume that the technology is not advanced enough to go underwater to find them. But we're talking about technology advanced enough to create the weapons with the power from the Tesseract. We're talking about, science advanced to, do all this other crazy stuff, like build his shield and all this other stuff. Like, you're telling me you couldn't come up with a submarine or something to try and dig him out? I don't know. I don't know.
And the only thing that can explain why he didn't immediately try to swim out of the ship is a couple of things. One, we assume he's knocked unconscious. We assume so because of the impact. Two, the minute that ship filled up with water, he's frozen solid. Well, doesn't that make the most sense? Like it would have happened that fast, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I watched this again, I thought, oh God, I'm going to do that Tom thing where I'm second guessing the freaking movie. But I couldn't help it. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. This does kind of make sense. Because, yeah, he couldn't have. I mean, he's not Wolverine. He couldn't exactly, punch his way out of the ship, I don't guess, or claw his way out. So I guess it makes sense if you look at it in terms of comic book logic that he couldn't get out.
Yeah, I feel like even if he could get out the ship, he didn't really have anywhere to go at that point. He was so far out. He was either gonna freeze or he was gonna drown at that point.
And how would he have let them know that he's okay anyway?
Yeah,
No radio. Yeah, good point. Good point. Even if he had got out, he would have. Well, maybe froze to death in the open air. Maybe I don't know. Good question. Um, Big time emotional moment. The Valkyrie goes down to the ice. It goes down through the water. The war is over. They show VE Day, the celebration in the street. The Howling Commandos toast the captain.
yeah,
Howard's men find the Tesseract. Dude, a lot of stuff happening here. Them winning the war was a cool moment. How they worked that in. It's good stuff here.
yeah. And I mean, to go back to your scene earlier when he acknowledges his regeneration from drinking, that's why freezing to death doesn't kill him because he is in a constant state of regeneration under the ice.
Hmm.
That's also why he doesn't age as fast.
Right. Right. Because Father Time can't affect him because it can't. Which doesn't affect why he's old in the last Avengers movie.
Well, I've always looked at it like he regenerates to a certain point where I don't think it's that he can't age. I think it's that he's aging slower than everybody else.
Hmm. Yeah, because okay, so if you do the math, the last Avengers movie was 2018, 2017. Has it been that long? Let's say 2017. So if he were, I don't know if I do the backwards math here, he would have had to have been pushing 100 at that point,
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, we're talking about him living a whole lifetime after being frozen and coming to the future and then going to the past and then coming back and living a, another lifetime again to get
Yeah.
to the future. So yeah.
Okay, well, if you put it that way, if you do all the math, that does add up. So, the movie that we think is over could have ended here, and it would have been fine because the last thing that we see, um, is one of the last things we see here is that Captain Phillips drops off Steve's folder with Peggy. It's stamped inactive. There's a pic of him before the serum, which makes her cry. And then we see this kid with this shield painted on the inside of a trash can lid. This movie has come full circle in so many freaking different ways. But then we get the great moment. 69 years later, Steve wakes up in what he believes to be a hospital. He hears a Dodgers game on the radio. Someone comes in and tells him he's in a recovery room in New York City. Why wasn't this Natasha Romanoff? Because she sure looks like her. Why wasn't this Black Widow?
I don't know. Maybe they didn't want to have them meet yet. I don't know.
Hmm. I mean, when I saw the actress, I did a double take and I thought, is that Scarlett Johansson? Because I forgot she was in it, but it's not. She even has like the same hair and everything, which is crazy. Um, but he says, where am I? And she tells him he's in a recovery room in New York City. He hears the game. He goes, where am I really? She says, I'm afraid I don't understand. He said, the game is from May of 1941. I know because I was there. And then she immediately starts trying to calm him down. And soldiers come in and he like throws them through the wall. And then he runs out of the building and into the middle of Times Square. Culture shock for this guy. He is officially a man out of time. The phrase a man out of time fits this guy so well. We finally get to see Nick Fury. He pulls up, says, at ease, soldier. We thought it best to break it to you slowly. You've been asleep, Cap, for almost 70 years. He says, "You're going to be okay?" And he says, "Yeah, I just, I had a date," which is another great one liner. And dude, in that moment, when I first saw this movie, when he says, "I had a date," all I could think of was, ah, he wasn't there a week from that Saturday. He wasn't there.
Yeah,
And I'm like, hey, moron, of course he wasn't there. But like in that moment, that's all that mattered to me is that he wasn't there with her.
yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, it was just such a great way to end the movie with that line. Um, man, I, we've sang Haley's praises a lot through this, but her talking him through landing the ship, and when it cuts off and she's just saying, "Steve, Steve," it's so good.
Yeah, she's so good. She's awesome. We do see Fury again, of course. The scene that Phil referenced earlier. Steve's hitting the heavy bag. He says, "Trouble sleeping?" He says, "You here with a mission, sir?" He says, "I am." He says, "Trying to get me back into the world?" And he says, "Trying to save it." And of course, we know Captain America will return in the Avengers. So, um, dude, I have hit you with this question before, and or this thought, but honestly, of all the times I've suggested, I think this is the time that fits maybe the best. If you don't nail this movie, nothing works moving forward. If like we said at the beginning, if he's too John Cena or he's too Zack Snyder, for lack of a better word, one way or the other, this does not work. The Avengers don't work. The entire MCU moving forward doesn't work, in my opinion. I mean, they had to nail this movie, right? They had to get this right.
Yeah, I feel like this movie doesn't get enough credit for the foundation it sets for the rest of not just the Captain America trilogy, but the Avengers franchise. Like, I don't feel like he is a fully formed character in those movies without this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I think back about the first Christopher Reeve Superman. If that movie had flopped, if that movie had tanked, would the next time they talked about doing a comic movie would have been laughed off the screen before it even happened? Like that movie has to work. It has to work for all this other stuff to work, and it did. Like two different universes, right? But still the same idea. Like if this movie had not worked, it's over. Like forget it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw this at you. I feel like Iron Man had to work. There was a lot on the shoulders of that movie
Yeah.
because of what it meant for in terms of real world stuff, like funding the rest of the franchise. Like,
Mm,
if that movie isn't a commercial success, um, we don't get we don't get the MCU. We don't get any of the rest of the movies that come after that. But because that movie was a commercial success, we got the Avengers franchise. But I would say narratively, if if the if First Avengers doesn't succeed at setting Captain America up as a believable character and a believable leader, then the franchise fails.
I agree totally. I don't think Avengers works at all after that because every time he takes the screen, it won't be real. It won't feel right because it'll be out of balance. We didn't talk about it. We're wrapping this thing up, but something that occurred to me because I'm watching a playback of this film now, and it's a kind of an odd little thing. Red Skull is red all over. Like in the comics, wasn't it just his head, or was it his whole body?
It depends. Like, there's some depictions where just his head is red, and some depictions his hands are red as well. Yeah, that depends on what depiction.
Yeah, interesting. Well, kids, there is your movie. Um, Classic. We can't say enough about it. Instant classic for my money. So good. Talk about I could do this all day. I could watch this all day. I've been known to do it, and I just don't get tired of it. None of it ever feels weird. None of it ever feels like it's too much. Now, you ask someone who's not a fan of the genre, they might have a completely different opinion, and that's fine. But even if you're just nothing but a movie fan, forget comic books. I mean, dude, if you drop the uniform and just the Red Skull as a character is still there, but it's this guy named Steve Rogers in a military, like in fatigues. This movie still works. I mean, it's a different movie because the symbolism isn't there, with the mask and the gear and everything. But this is still a good movie. Like anyone that hates on this stuff it's mind blowing to me, Phil. I can't wrap my head around it because it's so entertaining, and such a good story too.
Yeah. Yeah, I just, man, I'm glad that we got Chris Evans in this role. I think he brought so much to the role. I think that whoever wrote this movie did a great job of writing this movie and hitting all the right notes of setting this character up, setting Peggy up as a great almost female lead here. I mean, well, not almost female lead. She is the female lead of this movie. Um, but just, I mean, setting up Bucky for later, and just all the world building they did in this movie is just so good. Um, and then just having the foresight to bring in Joe Johnson, and everything that he brought from Rocketeer, like the same kind of magic from that movie that worked, and bringing it here and doing just almost like an updated, more polished version of it. It Yeah, it's just to me a perfect first movie of a trilogy, in my opinion.
And Rocketeer does kind of feel like a dress rehearsal for this movie, just a little bit. It's almost like, let's see if I can do this genre stuff. And then he does this years later and nails it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So, yeah. Not that Rocketeer isn't good. And depending on when we release all these episodes, kids, that's in the archive as well. Stay tuned. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it is a good movie, but I feel like it hits a lot of the same notes that this movie hits. And I feel like, yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like dress rehearsal is the right word for it, because I feel like he does a lot of these things right the first time around with Rocketeer, but I feel like he has a better script for this movie, and he's got more, of course, the bigger budget, like all the other things, the cast, and all these things to make this the movie that it is.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Great stuff, man. Well, as we said, kids, this is not the first, but as Hydra would say, the first of many, right? So yeah, this is not the first, but it was in order of the timeline. Yes, it's the first film. Captain Marvel follows this, and then everything follows afterwards. So um, we're gonna take this thing home, man. So what do you think? What's your last word on Captain America: The First Avenger?
Um, for my money, I feel like it is one of the most important movies in the MCU. I feel like a lot of people, when they recommend movies, people will always jump to the big ones like the Avenger movies, or some of the uh, more successful blockbuster hits like Black Panther. Some of the, but for my money, I think Captain America is extremely underrated. I feel like it is important. It's one of the most enjoyable movies in the franchise. And man, I feel like narratively, if this movie fails to set up Captain America as an integral part of the universe, then I don't know. I don't know if any of the rest of this stuff works.
Yeah, 100% agreed. It's not the same. It's not the same series of films that follows afterward, and maybe they lose steam at some point, and Avengers 2 doesn't even happen because all these reviews start coming in where it's, hey, the dynamic doesn't work, Cap doesn't feel right, he hasn't felt right ever. But none of those comments were made, thankfully, because Chris Evans knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Marvel hands the properties to the right people. Everything clicks.
I mean, just think about the X-Men franchise, for example. Um,
Mhm.
Cyclops never feels like the leader of that team in the movies. And I feel like that's a part of why, in my opinion, those X-Men movies never quite get it right, because he never really feels like Cyclops. He never feels like he's in command.
Mm. Dude, he really doesn't because it feels like it's Wolverine's team in a lot of ways.
Exactly. I think they do so much to make Hugh Jackman the star of that franchise,
Yeah.
and because he's seen as the star of it, they never really develop any of the other characters that well. And I feel like the greatest strength of the MCU is that they took the time to develop all of these characters before they brought them together in Avengers. And like no more so than they develop what makes Captain America special, because if you just throw this guy in this colorful Star Spangled outfit out there and say that he has military training and all of this and say he's the leader, then you don't get what makes him so special. You just don't get it.
Yeah, he is. He's the he's the humble, downtrodden. He is the meek inheriting the earth. He's the guy that never asks for a favor. He's the guy that never asks for anything. He's just, yeah, he's trying to give back. He's got nothing. This guy has nothing.
I mean,
and he's trying to give back to a country that, for the most part, has not appreciated him at all for anything. No one around him appreciates him except his buddy. It's like he's not even there, but he still is wanting to do the right thing.
I mean, just think about where we see Steve start in this movie, in an alley trying to fight a bully with a trash can lid, and we get all the way to Endgame and him fighting a giant alien. Like just how far he went, like just fighting a giant alien with a magical hammer.
right, and pushing the fist of Thanos back from his face, a human man, and Thanos has that look on his face as if to say, "Holy God, this dude's human. How's he doing this?" Like, yeah, crazy how far this guy's come, and he fits in. Doesn't matter how much globetrotting they do or universe baddie that they bash. He just he fits.
Man.
People give Hawkeye crap. What's the guy with the arrows going to do? But like, Cap's the dude from World War II with the shield. What's he going to do? But like, he fits in perfect.
Again, but that's why I say this movie is so important, because when you think about Endgame and you think about him standing up after the shield gets split in half, and he's standing there in that open field, and he hears "on your left," and the reason the rest of the universe and all the heroes that we've seen come and they stand behind Cap and they're willing to listen to him is because of what this movie sets up.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's great. And plus, you buy it. You buy it. You just buy him being the leader. It just makes the most sense. Yeah, I'm with you. I agree with everything you said. This movie is so good, and it's such a satisfying moment. And I won't get off on this, but I've mentioned many times here on the show that I am eternally grateful to these people. And it sounds hokey, and it sounds like, Tom, their movies relax. I cannot stress to anyone listening that when I was a much younger man, we had nothing. I was hoping that one day, hope beyond hope, we'd get something from Marvel that would be of some kind of value, and we could never get anything. Fast forward all these years later, and we continue to get things. And I am the happiest. I'm the happiest, biggest, oldest kid you've ever met. That these movies, God, man, this sounds ridiculous. These movies feed my soul like nothing else that I watch. They just do, and it's hard to put into words. I love pro wrestling. Pro wrestling does things for me. The MCU feeds a part of me going back to when I was a kid, an actual kid. I mean, it's just such good stuff. This movie is further proof of how these guys are getting it done. They're doing it right. As we said to kick this thing off, it's a classic. It's a great freaking film. I could watch this all day. So yeah, it doesn't get much better than this. And they do all they can to make it better, and they do a great job of it. But for today and for all time, Captain America: The First Avenger is one of the best they've ever done. A truly great film. And we'll be watching, I'm sure, Phil and I both, more than likely for a lot of years to come. And that is Captain America: The First Avenger. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.